Hey guys, I'm AJ.
I'm Shanique.
I'm Tazi.
So in 2018, we quit our jobs to travel the world and live a freedom lifestyle.
We wanted to share our journey with you.
So welcome to the family.
Hey family, welcome back to FroFamilyTravels. It's Shanique here. Hope you're all doing well. And we have another installment of Black Brits Abroad, where we share stories of melanated people who were based in the UK and decided maybe it wasn't quite for them anymore, and we want to hear more about how they're making their new life happen. So today I have with me Andrea, and I'm really excited for this one. Andrea is such an awesome person, and I'm going to hand straight over to her and allow her to introduce herself. Hey, Andrea.
Hey, hi everybody. My name's Andrea, as Shanique said, also known as Andrea Joyful. Through my platform, I am Andrea Joyful. I have been living in Antigua now for 5 years. I was originally born and raised in London, as were my parents, but my 4 grandparents are all from Antigua. And from about the age of about 16, I decided that I wanted to live in Antigua. I hadn't even done my GCSEs or anything, but once I'd finished doing my master's, I was like, you know what, I'm coming now, because I didn't want to get stuck into working in England and then be like, oh, I don't know if I want to come. And so, yes, I've been here for just over 5 years. I'm married. I just had a daughter in July 2021. So, yeah, life is going well. People are always asking me, you know, when are you going to go back to England? Are you going to move back? I'm like, no. So, yeah, so that's a bit about me. When I first came here, I was teaching. Well, actually, when I first came, I was waitressing at a hotel. Then I was teaching. I've been teaching for 4 years. And after having my daughter, I decided to go do some part-time work. And here I am.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So, wow, since you were 16, you decided, no, UK ain't for me, Antigua it is. What is it about Antigua, or what was it about the UK that made you decide? 16 is very, quite an early age to come to a decision like that. What happened?
Well, I first came to Antigua when I was 2, and I never came back again until I was about 14. And I came for my great grandma's funeral. It was all family. It was a great time. And then we came back for a family, like a big family holiday the following year. And I was like, oh, Antigua's just great. I loved it. It was over carnivals. It was a great time. And then when we got back, I was like, oh, mummy, daddy, when are we going back again? And they was like, we can't afford to go next summer. And I was like, I'm going. So I got a job. I saved up. My aunts, they own a travel agent, SN Travel. That's who I work for now as well. And I told my auntie Sandra, I said, I want to go to Antigua. Can you look up a flight for me? So she booked this flight. It was £375. I remember it to the T, because I remember making sure I got all that money ready to go. And I went to Antigua for 2 months after finishing my GCSEs, and I absolutely loved it. I stayed with 2 aunts that I didn't really know that well, had a great time, and I was doing like a work experience. And then after that, I was like, I want to live here. I think it was the fact of the weather. I'm really affected by the weather. And so having sunshine every day, blue skies, that really just gave me that like boost. And I think being there for 2 months as well, it kind of, and staying with local families, it was, it went beyond like being like a holiday. It was more like I'm living here. And then doing the work experience, I love the fact that when you go into these workplaces, not even just where I was doing my work experience, but everywhere, and it's all melanated people. It's all people that look like me, different shapes, different sizes, whatever, but in all levels of society. And I really loved seeing that and being a part of that. And like people not even knowing that not people not looking at you because you're any different. And then it's only like maybe when you speak and they're like, oh, you're British or whatever. And it's interesting because I always identified myself as being Antiguan until I came to England. And then, until I came to Antigua. And then that's when people were like, oh, you're British. And I was like, I'm not British. Like that was just so foreign to me because you know, you always get the question, oh yeah, I'm English. Oh no, but where are you really from?
Yeah,
so it was always like, when people used to call me English or British, I was like, wow, that has never been an identifier for me. So that was interesting, getting used to it. But yeah, I knew from quite an early age that this is where I wanted to be.
Wow. And how did your parents, I mean, did you tell your family, your friends, that you wanted to move from the age of 16, or not until closer to the actual time?
Good question. I think I probably told my mum and dad. I think I probably did, because when I moved, nobody was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're moving to Antigua. Because from that, so as I said, I saved up my money to pay for that first flight. And then after that, I was coming back every summer, sometimes summer and Christmas, especially when I was at university. Like, once that student loan hit, like, I was making sure I booked my flight, you know, priorities. But yeah, that was, I don't think it was a surprise to anyone, whether I verbalized it in that way, that I'm going to move to Antigua. They knew that I loved it, that I was always wanting to be there. So it kind of made sense, you know?
Yes. Wow. And what is it about Antigua in particular that draws you so much to it?
I guess, I mean, I always say it's my ancestral home, because that's where my grandparents are from. And I think, as I said, so I first came when I was 2, so don't really remember that. But so between 2 and 14, so that's 12 years, everything I knew of Antigua was through my grandparents, through my parents, through family and friends, and the stories. And then obviously, because I grew up with a lot of family, very close to my family and extended family, most of which are from Antigua, or rather Caribbean islands. So I was very much familiar with the culture, with the food. And so when I first went there, it felt very much like home, even though it was nothing like England. It just felt I felt very welcomed by my family there, making friends there. And so it just, I guess the best way to think is it felt like home. And, you know, we all want that. We all want that feeling of home, that feeling of safeness, that feeling of being loved, being welcomed, wherever that may be, or even if it's in multiple places. And I think that was what I felt when I went there. And I was just like, you know, I want to be here. And I think at that, like, the age of 16, you have no real concept or idea of what life is. You know, you kind of just like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. But, you know, as we know, the more we say things and the more we believe things, because at that age you say and believe without even thinking that, no, I could not live in Antigua, or I could not live in England at some point. And you just say it, and then things fall into place. And that's why I always say, when people are thinking about moving to a different country, I say, just do it. Just set a date and work towards it. And you'll be surprised how things just fall into place. I mean, even before I moved, when I used to book my flights, there were times when I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to pay the last installment next month. I don't know. I don't have the money. I don't know where. And sure enough, when that time comes, the money's there to pay it. So I think if you really are intentional about what you want to do, how you want to live your life, you live according to that, and things just work out, you know?
Absolutely. I'm a huge believer of that. And, you know, I think it's interesting that you say that, because it's like the older we become, society, the workplace, you know, governmental society pressures, you know, take a hold.
Even culture as well.
Yeah, culture, yes, absolutely. Culture take a hold of you. And like you said, when you're a young person, you don't know anything but to just believe and trust in, you know, what's in your mind and your thought process. But as you get older, society says, no, it's not possible. Society says you're supposed to do this, get a job, go to university, get married, get a mortgage, you know, follow all these so-called accepted norms. But I love the fact that because you came to this decision at such a young age, you were able to kind of almost avoid some of the, you said you went to university, so you still did some of those things, but you already had a path that you decided on before society came and placed its kind of ideals on you.
It's funny you say that, actually, because when, as I said, I'm 16 when I made that decision, and I suppose that element of just saying it, doing it, making it work has kind of followed me through my life. And so even like most recently, I was speaking to a friend that we went to secondary school together, so she knew me from the age of 11, and so I was saying, at this time I'm at, as I said, I've just started working part-time because I was like, that is the best thing for me, to be able to be with my daughter and to raise her and to spend these early foundational years with her. And I was like, I'm just going to make it work. I prayed a lot about making that decision, and even the way I wanted it to look, I was very specific in what I prayed for and asked God to provide for me, and everything came to fruition. And so and I was saying it to her, and she was like, well, Andrea, you've been like that since I've known you. You've always just had your mind set on whatever you're going to do, and you've gone through it. And I was like, I didn't realize that was an identifier of me. And she just, when she said that, I was like, wow, because I hadn't spoken to her in years, like a proper conversation like we did a couple of weeks ago. And so, she's speaking from the Andrea she knew at 11, and so it's obviously people are different, because I had a cousin in California, and she was looking for a nanny for her son. And I just got married, or was just about to get married. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to do that. Just get on a flight, go over there, and help her out. It would just be great. And then I was like, mentioned it to a cousin who was in childminding and childcare at the time. And I was like, our cousin needs this help. And she was like, oh no, I could never leave London. And to me, I was like, what do you mean? Like, that is a great opportunity. Like, you don't even have to look for work. You've got somewhere to live. Our cousin is so cool. But people are different. And not everybody can pick up and go. And I remember even when I moved, so many people were like, oh, you're so brave. You're so brave. And I was thinking, what is so brave about? I'm not moving to like a war-torn destination. I'm moving to Antigua. Do you know what I mean? But I think it's the fact, and it's something we've spoken about before, how people put their fears on you. And so people didn't really put their fears on me necessarily, but I could see that by me doing that, challenged things within them that made them think I was brave in a way that actually, I guess now I can kind of see where they're coming from in terms of just being able to give up everything I've really known and moving away. And especially because I come from a very close-knit family, and leaving that. Yep. But my parents were very supportive. I think they always knew that at some point they would be maybe transitioning to doing part-time in Antigua, part-time in London. So it kind of wasn't like I'm never going to see them again and Andrea again. So, it's just worked. I think, being intentional from, I guess, a young age helps me in the decision to move in, but also maintaining my life here without thinking, oh, you know what, I've got to go back.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's like, for me, not to say that I didn't think it was possible, but because I've wanted to live abroad ever since I was at university. I found out about gap years and, taking, exchange years and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this is a thing. No one ever told me you could do this. I would have loved, at that time, I was kind of obsessed with the US, but I would have loved the opportunity to go to the US and spend a year at an American university. But I just didn't know that it was possible. So sometimes we can't even comprehend beyond what we can see as well. And if we don't know anyone who's actually done it before us, representation is so important. We need to see people doing it. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to create this series as well, because I often think in the travel, the move abroad industry is very Americanized as well. Yep. So it's very rare to hear Black British voices as well.
I definitely agree.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
I think sometimes you just need to know that other people are doing it.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I was quite exposed to people moving abroad, like to the Caribbean, but when they're like in their 60s, like when they've retired and they've
That's
lived
the
their
next thing.
life and then they go back. I
Yeah.
knew I had like a few relatives that had gone like in their 20s, but then come back. And so, but no one at like my age. And well, actually, tell a lie, one of my cousin's friends had moved a few years before me. And so she was like a real guide, like a good guidance for me. And she was like, you know, when you come over, plan to stay for like 6 to 9 months, and then you'll know whether you want to stay or not. And that is something that really stuck out to me. And anybody that plans to move, I always say that, like, don't just pack everything and come for 6 to 9 months, figure it out, and then you'll know during that time, I want to stay, or no, this isn't for me. And I think that's probably another reason why a lot of people were quite surprised by me moving, because most people move to the Caribbean when they're older. You know, and so it's quite rare. But there are quite a lot of young people moving to the Caribbean, Antigua as well. And it's quite nice to connect with them and hear their stories, and you know, because we are all connected in being young people moving to the Caribbean, which is quite novel, I would say, at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say, I love the fact that you pointed out about kind of testing moving to the country first before fully committing to a place. And I think that's so important, because a lot of people have it in their idea that moving to the Caribbean, moving to anywhere is, you know, very idyllic, especially if you visit often for vacation. It can give a sense of being really pretty and airy-fairy and all sunshine and flowers. But, you know, real life, like any country, there's issues, there's things that happen. It's absolutely not perfect. And I think it's one of the reasons why we decided to continually travel first before deciding this is a place that we might like to be, you know, spend an extended amount of time or commit to, because I didn't ever want to pack up, go to one place, hate it, and then have to potentially move, going back or being stuck in a place, you know, that we didn't like. So I think that's such an important piece of advice.
Yeah, I think, as I said, that's something I always tell people, because we do have this idealistic view of other countries, particularly hot countries coming from the UK, that it's like, you know, we're always on the beach, we're always having cocktails, we're always, you know, having lovely fruit like pineapples, you know, like that isn't the reality. You know, you make your experience what it is, but you have to deal with the reality of living in these countries. And I think we're very privileged in the UK. Like I always say, like in Antigua, Antigua's always had a drought problem, right? So having running water. And so I remember, like, when I first came here and there were issues, and like, I said to myself, I never, ever, ever thought in England that I would turn on the tap and no water would come out. Like that never even crossed my mind, you know? That is a reality. That is a reality. I can turn on the tap and there'll be no water coming out. Or, you know, there's other things like just the ease of doing things, you know, like in England, everything's online, everything's contactless. You can go to pay by card wherever you go and In Antigua, it's not like that. So, you know, that like when you're going to the bank, you might be there for an hour just trying to do the most basic of things. But those are the things that you have to deal with. And I always say, everywhere has its pros and cons. You just have to know what pros and cons you're willing to live with. Absolutely. And so, okay, I don't have like the easiest banking experience here, but when I finish with the bank, I can drive to the beach, get some food, sit down and chill out.
Yes.
I can deal with that. Yeah. You know, like there's always going to be pros and cons. There's no ideal, there's no perfect place. Yeah. But You just have to choose what works for you. And also, like you mentioned, Shanique, about being stuck somewhere. You're not stuck anywhere.
True.
You know, like you can move. I mean, I think it was you that said we're not a tree. You can move.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess I meant more stuck in the sense, and you're right, you're never really stuck. But I meant more stuck in the sense of maybe like you signed a lease, and so you committed a certain amount of money, or like when we were in Ghana. If we decided that we were going to stay, and we were seriously considering staying in Ghana for a while, that was an option. But in Ghana, you it's complicated, but it is kind of expected to pay 2 years worth of rent up front. 2 years worth of rent, you know, and if something goes wrong, you're not getting that back. So you wouldn't, you're not stuck, but you could lose a considerable amount of money. And some people wouldn't have the choice but to see out that term until, you know. So I guess I'm a bit more stuck in that way, but you're right.
I definitely get what you mean. And even stuck in the sense of, I told everybody I'm leaving and moving to this place.
Right?
I can't go back. Like, it's funny. It just reminded me, my brother was meant to move to Australia. Like, he'd done all the thing, had a leaving party, got all these leaving cards and whatever. And then he got a job in the London Fire Brigade, so he didn't go. And it was like, and everybody was like, "Oh, so where's he going? Or is he gone?" He's like, "No, he's at the London Fire Brigade now." Blah blah blah. And then my mum was like, "No, you need to give them back their gifts and their cards. You can't just keep it. You didn't even go over." So, but I mean, my brother's the kind of person like, I don't care what people think, but some people feel like, no, I've got to go.
Yeah, the shame. They wouldn't be able to take the shame.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, and I mean, I think that does counter into things, but at the end of the day, it's your life. Whatever you want to do or whatever you don't want to do, I think that's the way that you should live. I think, as you said, we need to be less concerned with what society says. Yeah. And I've been speaking, as you know, with my platform, and I am Andrea Joyful. I speak about joy, and when I speak at events, I speak about so much. A big part of joy is living the life you want to live.
Yeah.
And that's the life you want to live, not what society tells you, not what your mum or dad told you. And I was speaking to a group of school leavers. Well, they're just about to finish school in Antigua a couple of weeks ago. And it was so refreshing speaking to those young people that are really at that, I guess at the age I would have been when I decided to move to Antigua, to kind of let them know that you create the life you want to live post-school, post-university. If you decide to go to university, whatever you want, you can have a play in that. Life doesn't happen to you. You create the life. And I was saying, you know, it's like being in a box. When you're following society, it's like being in a box that doesn't fit, it's uncomfortable, and you just need to step out of it and just live. It's scary, as I said to them, it's scary because if everybody's going left and you decide to go right, it's like, maybe I should just follow them. But I don't think nothing great comes out of staying in that box. Yeah. There's no passion. You know, you've got to just get out, as it were. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's otherwise it's a lifetime of regret, of feeling of, you know, kind of having to live with those feelings. And that's one of the reasons that convinced me to just go, is because I would rather try and fail than never try and live my entire life wondering what if. That is worse to me. That's so much worse. I can't.
I get exactly what you mean. Oh, I wish I did that. Yeah. And, you know, people say, oh, you know, I wish I could live the life you live, or I wish I could do that. And I'm like, what's stopping you?
You can, exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing, like, I'm not extremely rich. I'm not the smartest person in the world. There's nothing that is just so unbelievable about my story that makes it unachievable, unattainable for you.
Yeah.
But I think people are so happy to just be or just exist. Like, instead of like thrive and like really push themselves to do things that might not work, like you said, they might not work. But that, like you said, that scares me. The idea of not doing nothing, like the idea of just sitting back and world going on and I'm just moseying along, just, you know, not do that really scares me. I think all of us were born with a purpose, and I really believe that, you know, we've been put on this earth for a purpose, and whatever that purpose is for us to live it and live it to the fullest that we can. And so, yeah, that I can completely relate with what you're saying in terms of let me try it, and if it fails, or it works, and I'm happy.
I have come to the conclusion that, especially as melanated people, those of us in particular that are of the diaspora, that maybe have enslaved ancestors, I have come to the conclusion that we have become subconsciously, a lot of the time, addicted to our ancestors' struggle. It kind of first hit me when we were in Ghana. And like I said, it's subconscious, I think. But a lot of the time, I think because our ancestors went through so much, you know, struggled in the way that they did, two things. We have become accustomed to constantly hustling, constantly struggling, constantly just surviving. You know, that has been in our DNA for so many hundreds of years. And these things do literally get passed down. There has been scientific studies to say that we inherit that struggle. So we're kind of addicted. It's a part of us. It's literally a part of us. And also it feels safer. It feels like there's more comfort in that struggle rather than potentially, you know, like you said, it's the fear of not knowing what could go wrong. Yes, but what could go right? You know, there's a lot of fear attached to that.
Absolutely. I mean, me and my husband, we talk about that idea of struggle so much. Like we see it appear so much in older people, in younger people, and it's just like so unnecessary. And it's so hard, I think, if you're not aware of it or conscious of it, because even like when we were speaking about it with my parents and they were like, what are you talking about? Like they just weren't aware of it. And then when we was talking about it, it's like, you know what, it's so true, you know, because and they could think of examples in their friendship or family network or even in themselves. Because I'm like, even like since being here, like if I think to myself, I'm tired from work or I'm just tired from life and I don't want to cook, I'm not going to cook.
Right.
I am going to say, babe, let's go and order a pizza. Let's go and get something. Because I can afford to do that.
Yeah.
If I couldn't afford to do it, if I couldn't afford to pay my rent, if I couldn't pay to, not rent, my mortgage, if I couldn't afford to pay my mortgage, if I couldn't afford to pay my bills and stuff, that would be different.
Yeah.
And then I'm eating out and doing all these things. But I can afford to do it. I maybe can't afford to do it for every single meal.
Yeah.
But if there's a day that I'm feeling like, why am I going to struggle and push up my face and cook the food and bun up the pot because I'm vexed and don't want to be cooking, when I can just go out and buy something, we sit down, we're both happy, we enjoy a conversation, and we're happy.
Yeah.
And if you're not aware of it, and even if there's people listening to this now and they're thinking, oh, I never even thought about that, really challenge yourself, really push yourself to think, what ways am I living that is living in a struggle that I do not need to live in?
Exactly.
Because our ancestors struggled a lot. They went through a lot. We don't have to. Like for most of us, we're in the best place of our ancestral line than ever before.
Yes.
Like with our the amount, like our income, our family set up, our dynamic, you know, like most of us are in the best position of our ancestral line, but yet we still are reverting to like the tactics of our enslaved ancestors and in that colonial time as well. And I remember actually when I started I Am Andrea Joyful, it was after George Floyd was murdered, and I was really like, oh, do you know, should I do it, because I don't know how people are going to feel. You know, people are really upset. And then actually when I started doing it, I was like, you know what, Black people need this. We need to know that joy is valid. We need to know that there is a place for joy in our life. We need to know that we can have peace, we can have joy, we can have hope, even amidst this terrible time. And my cousin said to me, you know, you're like a joy activist. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, well, you know, you have cultural activists, political activists. You're a joy activist. That's what you do. You share joy with people. You encourage people to tap into joy, which is something that, as I always say, that a lot of Black people don't even think is like real. Like, how can I have joy when this is happening or when that has to do? But when you really like kind of retrain your mind, why can't you? Joy isn't about being happy all the time, but it's about being at peace with whatever is going on, good, bad, and ugly. Because life isn't always perfect. Like, as you know, we're living a life that people are like, oh, I would love to do that. But our lives aren't perfect. We still have to deal with everyday issues, you know, challenges that arise. But we're able to have that joy because we're at peace with it. The turning on the tap and not having water is not going to mash up my whole life. I'm not going to talk about that forever. I get over it. You know, oh, there's no water. Child, let's go to the beach then. Let's do this. Let's, you know what, let's just go and visit somebody. Or, you know, you just, and so that's really that is, as you know, is really important about encouraging people to really embrace joy in their life and leave that struggle behind. We don't have to do that anymore. We really don't.
Yeah. And that's another reason why I'm just so keen on sharing this side of things, because we have the choice. My thing is you don't have to struggle, like you said, and you have the option to do life differently, to create the life that you love. And I hope that just encourages some people, a few people, one person, if it's only one person, you know, that someone out there feels encouraged that there is different is possible for them. Awesome. Okay, absolutely. So let's talk more about Antigua then. So what does a typical day look like for you, if such a thing exists? I'm glad you added that second part, different. And I think my typical day now as a new mother is very different to my typical day like before I had my daughter. And so I think I'll kind of do a comparison of both to give a kind of aspect of both, because also they show two different sides of what living in Antigua could be like. So before, as I said, I was working for a government school. So I was working with all local people, local students. And the reason why I mentioned that is because a lot of people, when they come to wherever they go, they might choose to teach at international schools, which will then have a very different dynamic because it's international teachers, international students, etc. So I was at local schools, local secondary school, and my work hours were 7:45 to 1:30 p.m. So me and my husband would go to work together. He'd drop me off. I'd go to work for the day. And I, like lots of people think I stopped teaching because I didn't like teaching. I absolutely love teaching. I didn't like the bureaucracy of it and all the things, but being with young people, it's just so refreshing, and knowing that you can actually impart wisdom, share knowledge, share joy with them. We'd usually go and get lunch together. We'd usually go to the beach and just sit and have lunch at the beach. And then I'd either go and visit somebody because he finished work at 4. So I'd have about 3 hours or so where I would maybe go and visit family or just chill out, catch up on some work, and then we'd head home together, have dinner, and then
sleep, and then, you know, and then now my life is, for part of the week, I'm home with my daughter. We have play dates, which involve just lots of laughter and just kind of seeing her interact with other children, which is lovely, and interacting with other mothers, because that's something I think is really important as a new mother, speaking to other mothers, hearing their experiences and sharing, because there's so much similarity in the mothering experience as well as differences. And so we spend a lot of time doing that, just going out again, visiting family and friends, which, as I said, I think is something I took from London, because as I said, I had a close-knit family and we were always together and visiting. And so visiting isn't something that a lot of Antiguans really do, like go over and sit down. But that's something that I was raised as, and I really want to continue doing that. And, you know, as well, I like to visit a lot of the elders in my network, because, you know, they're often the forgotten generation. People don't really always visit them. And so when you pop up and surprise them, then came in. And I think it's important for me as well, and for my daughter, because my grandparents are all in London. So it's good for her to be able to experience those older people, and for them to see young, new life and, you know, generations coming through. And then for the rest of the week, as I said, I work part-time, but because I work for a UK-based company, I do UK hours. So I wake up early. So I start work at 5, which is very bright and early for me, and I love my sleep. But 5, so I work 5 to 1 p.m. But I'm usually, my desk is on my veranda at the back, so I have a lovely view while I'm working. And my husband works from home as well, which works well. And then I finish at 1, have a nap, always standard, finish a work day and have a nap, and then just chill out. I just feel like there's so much more time in Antigua. Like, I obviously we have the same 24 hours as everywhere else, but I just feel like I have so much time, and there is so much more time to do things that you wouldn't do in London. And even like, it's like maybe even commuting. Obviously I'm working from home, but even when I was working, my commute to work was like 25 minutes. And I used to be like, oh my gosh, that's so long. But when you're in London, you'll commute an hour and a half, 2 hours. And that just takes up so much time for you to spend with your family, with your friends. So that is as well why, even though obviously I enjoy weekends, I'm not like dying for the weekend, because a lot of the things that people would probably squeeze into the weekend, I'm fortunate enough to be able to do in the week. Again, my life isn't a standard life of a standard Antiguan or even a standard person that's moved to Antigua, but that is the dynamic and the life, again, that I prayed for and am living now, because I knew I didn't want to be working full time with a new baby. I knew that I wanted to have more time to actually spend. Because even that, when we're talking about getting a mortgage, so my husband and I, we've just become homeowners. And I'm thinking, you know, can you imagine taking out a mortgage and then not even living in your house for the most of the time? Like, because most of the week people are away from home.
Yeah.
And then at the weekends, they just want to get out and go out. And that's just,
exactly.
Wow. And I mean, I feel really blessed. Like I always say, I said, you know, like I really love my home, and I go out, but it's really nice to have a safe space and a home. And I feel blessed to have that, because I know not everybody has that. But yeah, so I don't really know. I think that I did answer the question of my average day.
I think Andrea and I do talk outside of this. I'm like, you forgot to mention about sitting under your mango tree and that the beach is a walk away.
But yeah, I say thanks, Shanique, for selling that. Yeah, we are, yeah. It's funny you say about the mango tree, because there's two things that when we was looking at the houses, we looked at about 20 different houses before we bought this one. And the two things, I was like, I want to have a mango tree. I love mangoes. That is my all-time favourite. I was like, I want to have a mango tree. And my husband was like, I want to have a good breeze coming through the house. And this house has both. The only tree in the yard is a mango tree. And we've got our like our garden furniture underneath. So lots of people, it's like an extension of the house almost. And then, yeah, as Shanique said, we're like I think it's about a 4-minute walk to the beach. And when we walk there and I'm like pushing the buggy and going down there, and even now, I'm still like, wow, I can't believe I live here. Like, it just really takes my breath away that I live in such a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And one of the things, a lot of people that live here and like people that have like black expats and stuff, when we meet up, we're always like, you know, we've got to make the most of the natural resources, and even like going to the beach, the hotels, the restaurants and things, because people pay thousands of pounds and dollars to come and experience that for a few days. Yes. We live here. There's no reason why we shouldn't check into a hotel for a few nights or do a day pass, or, you know, when we go to the beach, there's very much a tradition in Antigua of cooking up a ton of food and going down to the beach. But I'm like, you know, that can sometimes be like, oh my gosh, I can't bother to cook up all that food. Go and buy some food. Again, we don't have to struggle. Go and buy some food and let's meet down at the beach. We'll bring this, you bring that, and we'll just all enjoy together, because life is to be enjoyed, and life is to be enjoyed with other people. The idea of, oh no, it's just me or me and my husband or me and my children or da-da-da. No, life is to be enjoyed with people. We share, we learn, we grow best when we're with other people.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Wow. So you've mentioned that you own your own home. Now, I'm sure people will be a bit curious about that. And, you know, obviously in the UK, for many people, many young people, especially in their 20s and 30s, owning your own home is becoming unattainable. Some people are just feeling like they can't get onto the property ladder at all, or, you know, we're now seeing trends where it's taking much longer. People are having to wait until their 40s before they're able to get onto the ladder, and sometimes that's only even with help from parents as well. So what was the process like of purchasing a home in Antigua?
Well, our process was a bit different to like most people. Well, originally, my mother-in-law, so my husband's wife, had given us, my husband's mum had given us some land. So our original plan was to build on that land, and we were only going to build a small 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom structure. We didn't want to build a big house, get this big mortgage and struggle to pay it, and also be in a position where, you know, where we are in the Caribbean, most of our time is spent outside. I already spoke about being under the mango tree. So do we really need a big house, or would we rather have that rest of that money to use to do other things? So that was the original plan. And then when I found out I was pregnant, we was like, we wouldn't be able to build the house in time for the baby to come because of like the lockdown and different things like that. So that's when we started looking. And I think for us, because we had really been, that was part of the plan to build a house. We were very much in the mindset of getting our own home, and had made like the financial decision to do that we was on our way to doing that. Whereas I think a lot of young people or people our age, it can maybe feel unattainable. And I think renting is a big thing in Antigua as well. But I think it is achievable if kind of changing the mindset. So I think the big thing in Antigua is building your own home. And lots of people build either on the land that they live on with their family, or there might be family land inherited, like in our situation. And they usually build like a small structure on there and live in that kind of thing. But I guess as time goes on, people have bigger ideas of wanting to live somewhere else. And I think it is quite achievable if you kind of bring it down. If you bring it down, like I said, what we were going to do, bring it down to like a 2-bedroom house, it is more attainable. And the government have also they've realised that a lot of young people want to build, but are finding it hard to get land or to buy a house. And so their thing actually is affordable housing. And even if you're a single woman or single man on one salary, you're able to afford. And I think that's quite important. I don't think it's necessarily like home ownership is wouldn't say it's important, like it's something that everybody should have if they don't want to. But I think if that is something that you aspire to, having the opportunity to do that and not having to like sell your soul to build a house or to buy a house or whatever, I think that's quite important. And I think it is definitely, I would say, I think it is easier here because, again, like the housing setup is very different. So you can just build like a wooden structure on land and live there and you'll be fine. Whereas in England, you have to buy a house. You can't just say, oh, you know what, I'm only going to put this little thing. No, you have to buy the house that is there or the flat or apartment that is there. So I think that's what kind of makes it different. And I think more achievable to have this big whopping house at 30 is more not really likely to happen. And I mean, that's here or in England. But once you kind of have the idea that, okay, let me start small. But that's another thing as well in Antigua. A lot of people might build like something smaller and then add on because we have that building kind of culture. So yeah, I would probably say it's probably a bit more easier or attainable here. But there are still struggles and you know, challenges that are in place, I would say. And even because, as I said, we bought a house, that's quite rare, but it works for us. And what we did is as well was we bought a house that is a duplex. So there's two houses in one. So we live in one, and the idea is once the other side's been renovated, to rent that out like an Airbnb. So we've used it. It's great for us, you know, and which I'm really feel quite grateful. And we're hoping to kind of, so it's quite interesting you brought this up because me and my husband, where we've already set up the Instagram page, we're just trying to get everything sorted, you know, what it's like children, house, everything, life. But we really want to share our story of purchasing, of exactly what you said, to kind of show people, because you don't really see that. You don't really see people that look like us, what their experience is buying a house in the Caribbean. You see a lot of people from America, Canada, that come with like when they've retired or with big salaries and, you know, and they're able to just buy this villa in an established area. So I think it's quite important to kind of show the different side of it. And so we've set up a page, Meet the Brands, MEETTHEBRANNS. So you can go and follow us. And as soon as we get, you know, our content going and stuff, I think it will be a really valuable source just to give a different perspective. And our real mission is to help people to know that there are other ways to do it, which is what we're here for, me and you are here for, to show that there are other ways to do it in all aspects of life. Because home ownership, if you choose to rent, if you want to build, if you want to buy, just showing people that, oh, there are people that look like me, my kind of age, doing this. And that's what we really want to do.
Wonderful. I so can't wait to follow along and see what you get up to with that page, because that sounds like it will be a really valuable resource. Fantastic. And what about your monthly costs in Antigua? How would you say your living costs compare now to life in the UK?
Oh, much less. Like without a shadow of a doubt. And it's kind of hard for me to give like a kind of a figure for figure kind of comparison, because again, we've just moved into a house, so we're still kind of getting into our flow now. And then we were living on in where Caboose grew up, on the land there. And then when I was in England, I just finished doing my master's and studying. So it's a bit hard for me to give like a dollar for dollar or pound for dollar comparison. However, I think what makes living in the Caribbean cheaper, because the cost of food isn't cheaper like in the supermarkets, because so much of it is imported. So a lot of it can be more expensive, but you spend less here. Like I always say, like in England, you go to Primark, you say you're going to go and buy a pair of earrings. The next thing, you're £80 later, jeans, dress, Here, you don't shop like that. Like you like a lot of people, if they are shopping, if they're going out for an event, they'll go and buy an outfit for that event. Most people don't just shop for the fun of shopping, as it were. Whereas in England, you know, that is like a big thing. I think a lot of people shop out of necessity, so like buy what they need, as opposed to just buying stuff for stuff's sake. That's that, and I think that is where a lot of money, well, what I could see when I was in England, where I wasted a lot of money. Like if I think about all the stuff that, I mean, even like clothes, like we wear more or less the same clothes over and over again. You have your work clothes, you have your, you know, but yet you'll have a wardrobe rammed full of all these clothes, and it's just like so unnecessary. And I think here as well, things are a lot more casual, so you don't have to have like a big, you know, it's just very different. So I would say you save a lot. I always say, actually, if you live in Antigua, if you've got somewhere to live and a car to drive, your other spending isn't that much, because eating out is a lot cheaper than in England. In like, if you be at local places, you can get really good quality food, big portions as well, for a lot less. Obviously, if you're going to hotels then or restaurants and stuff, that's obviously different. But I think, yeah, once you've got somewhere to live and a car to drive, you can live on quite, or not much, you know, because there's not like I suppose, which can be a pro or a con, but there's not so much to do in Antigua like there is in the UK, where you would be out all the time. And a lot of the things that you do are revolved around that things that would be free, you know, like visiting people, going to the beach, going to the park, you know, like you're not going to be spending loads to go to, I don't know, like an arcade or, you know, so you get what I mean. It kind of balance. Those are the things that make it cheaper as well. Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah, and obviously, if you are making pounds or US, your money goes really far.
Even further as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So could you give hard to say, I guess, you know, but could you give kind of an average cost of what it might be to rent like a 1 or 2 bedroom place around where you are?
For short term or long term?
So say like someone wanted to say sign for like a 6 to 12 month lease.
I think if you were, it's hard to kind of give that kind of idea, because it really depends where you want to stay. Yeah. Again, like if you're in like a touristy area, you could be spending like maybe about 3,000 US per month, depending on the thing. But then if you're willing to go more local, you could pay about 2,000 EC or 2,500 EC, which is about about 750 pounds, about that a month. So it really kind of depends what kind of living arrangement you want to kind of live in. And that's the one thing I do say about Antigua. I really do think there is something for every budget. It's just knowing the kind of things, like if you want a more cost friendly, you're not going to be in the touristy areas. You're going to be probably a bit further out. But Antigua's so small anyway. You might be far from a touristy area, but if you want to go there for whatever reason, you're not going to have to go that far. So I think, yeah, I would say there's something for every budget, low and definitely high end. There's a lot of high end properties and stuff here, but yeah, so varies really.
Of course, but I think, yeah, it's the same here as well. You know, we do technically live in a tourist town. Playa is very touristy, and if you want to live kind of a 5-10 minute walk walk away from the beach, similar, you know, 1-2 bedroom place probably would set you back £2,000 to £3,000 a month. However, you know, we live a bit further away. It still probably only takes us about 15 minutes. We jump on a bus, 15 minutes, we can be at the beach. And we're paying just over £400 per month. So, I think if you live as an expat, and you live in those touristy places, you're going to pay touristy prices. But like you said, there often is something to do every budget, where if you can be, for me, the aim is to be as local as possible, to do as the locals do, and it can be extremely affordable, but it can also be just as expensive as London if you're not careful and selective, a bit more selective as well.
That's very true. So you mentioned about like different areas that expats might live in, and I wanted to ask you the question of, what do you define an expat as, and even do you identify as an expat?
This is such a difficult question, and there is no one simple answer. There was actually a question that came up similar about this on Travel Noir, and it was talking about the differences between an expat and an immigrant, and the impact that has on the local society, as the local country as well. It's so loaded. I don't consider myself an expat. I consider myself a global citizen. So I don't like the idea of being tied to one nation in particular, because I do kind of feel like those borders have been forced upon us. They never used to exist. So that's something I do strongly believe in, is those borders were given to us. Our ancestors didn't live with borders, especially in the motherland. There weren't these different countries. The country names that we have today were forced upon us by colonizers. So it's very difficult to give it a name in particular, and that's why generally we consider ourselves kind of global citizens. And I like the term, being a digital nomad, and the idea of being nomadic. We're wanderers. We don't like the idea of staying in one place, and that's why we've been wandering around the world for 4 years now. So expat, no. Immigrant, no. But I think they hold very different weights. As we know, immigrants, the name immigrant tends to
absolutely
be pushed upon Black and brown people that tend to be moving kind of on a permanent basis to another country, usually because they might be trying to escape some kind of turmoil, maybe in their home country, whereas expat has this European luxury, I'm moving for work, or maybe a temporary basis, or it's nice. It's a nice term, whereas immigrant doesn't come across. It has a lot of very negative connotations, I often think, whereas they are
absolutely
generally. But I understand when I talk to expats. When I talk, my grandparents maybe would have been considered immigrants when they moved to the UK under the Windrush. They were part of the Windrush generation. They would have been considered immigrants. But at the end of the day, immigrant or expat, generally, everyone is seeking a better quality of life. Everyone wants the same thing. They want to work on their work-life balance. They want to enjoy their life.
True.
They want to provide better for their children. The reasons, I generally feel, are very similar, but they've been labeled differently. So it's all labels. It's all labels and names that have been put upon us. And I do find it very difficult
I completely get what you mean, because like I don't identify as an expat, but I can understand why people would possibly give me, as you said, give me that label. But then when I do think of, and even like, I think somewhere in this, I might have said like Black expats. And so the reason why I put that identifier as well is because you have an idea that the expats are usually give a term given to white people. And so it's kind of like a reclaiming in the sense that no, not all expats look like that. Not all expats are white people. But also it's quite challenging, because even like I understand that obviously living here, I've lived a more local life than some other people that have moved here. But I still have the privilege of being born and raised in the UK. And so there are some expat as whatever other labels you want to include. And I think that that does have to like factor into certain to just how we live and how we may be perceived, and the opportunities, the things that we can maybe do that other people that might even be identified as immigrants because they're not English speaking, or you understand what I mean in that sense. And I said about being a global citizen, because it's just mind-boggling to me that like you have to have a visa to go to certain countries. Like, who are you to say where I can and can't go? You didn't create this country. You didn't, like that. Those kind of things just really just don't make sense. And I know some people might be listening and being like, well, that's their country, that's their rules. But the land was made for us all. And I believe that we should be able to move freely. Because even like if you think about, as you said before, especially in the motherland, people move freely. They might have been identified as foreigners because they weren't from that land, but they were free to move through it and go about their business or settle or whatever it may be. And it's just quite, yeah, I just wanted to get your perspective on that. And it was really interesting to hear your thoughts on it. Because I think it's something that still kind of, I don't think about it that much, to be honest. I'm just thinking about, I'm Andrea, I'm just doing what I'm doing. But I do sometimes, like the idea of expats and what does that mean and what connotations come with that. Do I want to perpetuate that? Do I want to challenge that? Do I want to just identity? Because at the end of the day, it all links back to identity and how we identify ourselves, but then also how other people want to identify us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you an example. When we were in Ghana, and I'm of Jamaican heritage, as is AJ, and it's quite commonly known that Jamaicans, or many Jamaicans, will have ancestral roots in Ghana. It's quite likely that our ancestors came from there. And when we visited Ghana, we went to Cape Coast Dungeon. Mm-hmm. And you have to pay to enter. It's not free. It's not free for Ghanaian citizens. It's not free for foreigners. But for Ghanaian citizens, it was, say for example, it was like 10 cedis or something, which is like a couple of pounds. But for foreigners, it was like 100 cedis. So significantly more. And I remember we had this discussion with one of our friends about this, and it's actually quite a difficult pill to swallow, to be seen as a foreigner, having to pay foreigner prices when actually this is the land, most likely, highly likely, the land of my ancestors. It is highly likely that this is where I am from. I am not a foreigner, Even though, technically I might not have been born and raised here, but the chances are that my literal blood runs through these veins came from here. Highly, highly likely that my bloodline comes from here, but you don't see me as one of you. You know, I am a foreigner to you. I'm not, I'm, you know, I'm a cash cow, basically. I'm an ATM. It's a difficult one. It's a very difficult one. Have you experienced any kind of culture shock since moving to Antigua?
I would probably say, that is a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. Culture shock. I think one of the biggest culture shocks, which I kind of alluded to before, was actually the culture shock of being Antiguans not seeing me as Antiguan. That was a shock for me, because growing up, that was how I identified myself. And it's funny, we just spoke about identity, because I identified as an Antiguan. So coming British or English, that was a culture shock for me. That was a culture shock for me. And to be honest, that was a culture shock. And also, and this might be a bit of a corruption. I'm not saying that only in non-Black countries that there would be corruption, but I just kind of expected the government, politicians would be more supportive of their own, because we are their own, you know. And it kind of reminds me of one of my friends, she always says, not all skin folk are kinfolk. And so that was kind of a shock to me, that I was like, wow, a lot of the things that are happening in politics and government here in Antigua aren't that dissimilar to the things happening in the UK. And if anything, is even more prevalent here or more prominent here, because Antigua's so small and everybody knows everybody, and people are related to the politicians, friends with the politicians, neighbours with the politicians. So everything feels much more intense. And so, although I think those are probably the two things that kind of come to mind when you ask that question.
So what is one thing that you wish people had told you about life in Antigua that you had no idea about, that you wish you knew in advance?
That's a good one. There's nothing that immediately comes to mind. And the reason why I think that as well is because everybody's experience in Antigua is and will be so different. And so something that someone might have told me, maybe they did tell me, and it hasn't been my experience, or it hasn't affected me in the same way it affected them. So I don't think there's anything in particular that stands out. And I think also on the flip side, you also have to be cautious of what people do tell you about their experience living in a place that you possibly want to live, because everybody's so different. But yeah, there's nothing really that leaps out at me immediately to think of what I wish I had known. Everything I've been through, I've learned through it, I've enjoyed, I've maybe not enjoyed so much, but there's nothing that I'm like, I wish I knew that before coming, to be honest.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you, Andrea, so much for your time. I think we've had a couple of connection issues, unfortunately, kind of towards the end there, but I'm going to drop all your social media links in the description so people can catch up with you and everything that you're getting up to. But thank you for joining us, giving us your amazing time and energy. So much love to your husband and your beautiful baby girl. And thank you, family, for joining us with another Black Brits Abroad, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye.